So if 2020 has taught us anything, it's to expect the unexpected. Nevertheless, trend experts will still try to predict what will be hot this year. The 2021 trend predictions will be announced on the 28th of January. The virtual event will be led by trend expert Dion Chang. So let's discuss this with futurist, economic and trend analyst Bronwyn Williams from Flux. Bronwyn, I can't even work out what's going to happen in the latter part of my day. So what is it that you're going to be seeing for us this year?
Yeah, thanks so much for inviting us on the show. So at Flux Trends, we're looking at a couple of really big shifts that we see in our society, most of which have simply been trends that have been in play for some time that were just accelerated by our new creative constraints that we have found ourselves in over the last sort of 12 plus-ish months at the moment. I think the first thing that's worth talking about is the shift to what we're terming the metaverse, which really is how we're starting to set up more and more stores of value in virtual spaces. So that can sound quite futuristic, but if you think about things like even the very fact that I'm now talking to you through a Zoom call, that we're connecting with our colleagues on a virtual platform in a much more integrated way than we were doing previously, where we were merely using the internet as sort of an internet or telephony sort of system. So we're now connecting with people on much richer levels. But this is really just the tip of the iceberg. Where we're going is quite exciting, in that we're starting to see people setting up whole entire new economies. You can almost sort of term it the metaverse-onomics going on in this virtual plane. And I think that an example that will resonate with a lot of your viewers here today would, of course, be the whole Bitcoin phenomenon, which is a virtual currency that doesn't have any sort of, real tangible backing to it, but it has captured collective consciousness, and it is starting to actually change the world. So we're seeing businesses starting to invest in Bitcoin as basically their cash reserves. We're even talking about now countries considering Bitcoin to be, in the future, the global reserve currencies. This is quite a big shift from a more sort of tangible, sort of global currency like the dollar that we all use to a much more virtualized currency. But that still doesn't really take us to where we're going next. What we're starting to see in this whole sort of metaverse-onomics trend is that people are starting to set up purely virtual businesses. This was something that really captured our imagination last year when we saw the whole world pretty much went into lockdown and people were trying to find new ways to connect with each other. But not only that, people were having to find new ways to make money, to support their families and to support themselves. And what we started to see was a lot of real-world professionals starting to ply their trades in a very virtual environment. So perhaps you're familiar with the breakout sort of gaming hit from last year, that was Animal Crossing. What we started to see there was that real-world interior and fashion designers were selling their services to game players, who were then in turn spending real money in the form of the game's in-game currency, also building a whole sort of new ecosystem in there. So you found that people were paying for skins for their little fuzzy avatars, and it'd be like clothing for them, and paying quite substantial amounts of money, and quite big brands were getting involved in that game too. And then interior designers too. So if you weren't able to go out physically and design someone's home interior or office interior, what you could do was design their virtual home in their gaming environment, which is really quite extraordinary, particularly when we start sort of tying those threads together with the whole sustainability narrative. Because suddenly when we start to build, new economies in a virtual space, and people are willing to buy and sell and trade real goods and real services in a virtual environment, perhaps there are ways for us to have a bit more economic growth without overshooting our sustainability bounds.
Wow, I mean, that really is fascinating, isn't it? So, I mean, it's that whole world out there, isn't it, whether it's real or imagined. But coming back down to us here, the sort of the physical trends that you're going to see when it plays out, for example, from a political point of view or from an emotional point of view, and how humans are expected to behave. Is there anything that you imagine is going to happen or know is going to happen?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So the big takeaways also that have been these large macro trends that have been in play that have now been brought to the fore. I heard you talking a bit earlier about that whole sort of great reset or new world order trending on Twitter. That's absolutely part of the conversation right now. And a lot of that conversation is framed around reconsidering what economic growth is. So it ties in quite nicely from that whole sort of metaverse-onomics conversation, in that we're having to question whether we can base our global economy sustainably from an environmental and a social perspective if it's premised purely on growth. So perhaps sort of virtual economies give us a little bit of leeway there to sort of start growing without overshooting our natural resource bounds and our resource endowments. But we're really having to have much deeper conversations about sustainability, but not just sustainability from an environmental perspective, also from a social perspective. In that, of course, we have seen inequality grow extraordinarily across the world, not just locally, but globally, due to the effects of what happened in 2020 with the pandemic and all the various responses our governments have tried to impose. What we've really seen is a massive switch in inequalities. The rich have got a lot richer and the poor have got a lot poorer. So we're having to find ways to reconsider and reframe our economies that are more sustainable. So one of the ideas that has come out that has got a lot of attention, that is going to be shaping economies and business plans going forward, is this whole concept of stakeholder value rather than just shareholder value. How you feel about that is up to you. But it also ties in with this other conversation that has also had a chance to get some air and breathing space around what they're terming sort of donut economy, which takes the circular economy to the next level. And it really says that we do have to focus our economic growth, particularly at a national level, in between two bounds that take cognizance of both social and environmental sustainability.
Well,
so
Bronwyn, we're going to have to leave it there, but you've got me quite excited. I mean, it sounds quite dynamic, doesn't it? And as you say, it's opening up a whole new economy and world. Bronwyn Williams, thanks for that. Let's get this.